IRS notice CP90. This is an intent to seize your assets and your notice, a notice of your right to a hearing. So we'll go over this. This is from the IRS website. It's a 5-page notice. Before we go through the rest of it, I want to point out a couple of things at the very top of this notice. In the right-hand corner, you'll see the notice number. More importantly is the notice date. Because you can make an appeal, you generally have 30 days from the notice date to file your appeal. So that's item number one, and we should see some reference to the appeal date further on in the form. So pay attention to that. As part of the appeals process, you have up to 30 days, in this case, to request what's known as a collection due process hearing, or CDP hearing. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But also, your social security number, contact information. So just make sure your social security number is correct. And then over here on the left-hand side is the taxpayer name and address. I always like to point this out because if your address isn't up to date in your IRS records, then it might take longer for your correspondence to get to you, which may impact the amount of time you have to request that appeal. So remember, you have 30 days from the date of the notice, and that includes all the days that your correspondence might be hung up in the postal system. So make sure that you keep your address up to date. Normally, when you file your tax return every year, the IRS updates your address automatically. But you can also call the IRS, and you can also file the official change of address form known as IRS Form 8822 for individual taxpayers, or IRS Form 8822-B for business owners. All right, let's take a closer look at this. So here is the billing summary. It says that you owe $59.47.81. For some reason on this notice, there are no additional penalties or interest charges. Most normally, I would assume that if the IRS is at the point in collections where they're about to start seizing property, you would actually see penalties and interest here. But the notice says we haven't received full payment despite sending you several notices about your unpaid taxes. So at this point, this is the notice where the IRS may levy your property, but you can appeal this by requesting what's known as a collection due process hearing under Internal Revenue Code Section 6330. Now, this has a specific date, February 22nd, 2019. Again, that is 30 days from this notice date. So that is the date that you have to appeal. If you chose to send payment directly to the IRS, you can do that on the IRS website. But if you mail a check or a money order, you should do a couple of things. First, make that check or money order out payable to the United States Treasury. Second of all, cut off this payment voucher and put it in the envelope. Do not staple it or otherwise attach it, but put it in the envelope with your payment. And then on your payment, write your social security number and the tax year on your payment, as well as any correspondence that you happen to send. Always use the address for the payment here. If you go by this address up here, in this situation, the Philadelphia office, it's the same address, but I have seen notices in the past where the address on the payment voucher is different from the address on the letterhead. So when in doubt, just defer to the address on the payment voucher. So in this part, we're talking about what you need to do immediately. So obviously, the IRS will try and get all of their money up here. You can also request an installment or a payment agreement. If you request an appeal or a collection due process hearing, the collections process does stop. So that means that the IRS can't seize any property until they've gone through the entire appeals process, and that includes your ability to contest any decision from the IRS Independent Office of Appeals. You can do that through the U.S. Tax Court under a CDP hearing. So you can keep this going under the appeals process, and as long as your request is continued in the appeals process, the IRS cannot collect against that. They cannot seize your property to do that. So if you if you have an active installment agreement, so if you file IRS Form 9465 and the IRS approves that, then you would be in good shape as well. So there is some more information about federal tax liens. Basically, how tax liens work is that the notice of a federal tax lien notifies your creditors. So if you have a mortgage or if you have a car loan, this lets all of those entities know that the IRS has a claim against your property. So to include property that you might have purchased after the lien was filed. So once that lien's notice has been filed with the creditors, it might show up on your credit report. So, to the extent that you can, you should strive to do what is reasonable to keep this off your credit report. So also, if your tax debt is significantly high, in this case over $52,000, the State Department is required by law to cancel your ability to use your passport. So you can't apply for one, you can't get issued or renewed a passport, and as long as you have this much tax debt, the State Department may actually go out and revoke your passport or limit your ability to travel outside the United States. So, this is for, preventing people that may leave the country to avoid paying their tax debt. So if the IRS doesn't hear from you within, in this case, 30 days, they may seize or levy whatever property would most efficiently pay off your debt. So this can come out of your paycheck. This can come from bank accounts, business assets. They can take your car, your home, although the IRS does try to figure out what would be less impactful. So, if there's $5,000 in cash and you owed $5,500 and you have a $200,000 house, the IRS will probably be more likely to go after the cash and then just keep requesting, hey, why don't you pay us the rest of that money, as opposed to, going out of their way to, seize your home and then auction it off and then collect whatever money they owe from you and then give you the rest of the proceeds. So the IRS does try to, figure out how they can lessen the impact. But these are all the types of assets they can go after: Social Security benefits, state tax refunds, federal tax refunds, so on and so forth. So this is kind of what your billing details might look like. This is probably not an accurate description, but it would have the tax period end date, your form number, how much your original tax bill was, any additional interest, additional penalties, and then a summarized total for each tax period. In this section, there's a discussion about how the IRS calculates failure to pay penalties. In this situation, for some reason, there were 0 on that first page, so you can't really actually see how this was applied in this situation. But in that section, you would actually see kind of a calculation of your tax penalties. So you can request a removal or a reduction of tax penalties, either under what's known as first-time abate. So if you've never had any penalties assessed before, you can do that. You can If you're able to show reasonable cause, you can have the IRS remove penalties if you can demonstrate reasonable cause. And if you followed the IRS's written advice, where you wrote to the IRS to get written advice on a specific issue, you gave the IRS adequate and accurate information about the situation. You received that written advice, which you implemented, and then if the IRS turns around and penalizes you, you can file IRS Form 843 to get that taken off of your tax return. And IRS Form 843 would also be the form that you would request either under the first time abate or some sort of other reasonable cause. That's the general request for abatement form. So there isn't a form to request interest charge reduction, but if the IRS recalculates your taxes based on a reduction in penalty, or if there's some other reason that a tax is recalculated in your favor, then the IRS will go back and recalculate the interest on any changes to the taxes and penalties, which may reduce your overall bill. So that's kind of automatically done whenever your taxes and penalties are reassessed. So there's no specific form to request that interest change. So here's some additional information. The one that's a hyperlink is right here, and I'll click on it just to see if there's anything on the IRS page. I think it's kind of more of what you would specifically, have seen in the notice. So you can have someone represent you in front of a CDP hearing. That would be like your accountant or a tax attorney, an enrolled agent. You would file IRS Form 2848, which is the power of attorney form to do that. You would request the CDP hearing on IRS Form 12153. That's the actual request form for a collection due process hearing. And again, if you don't like this result, you can pursue a further appeal in tax court. However, your accountant or enrolled agent would not be able to represent you in front of the tax court. You would need either to represent yourself or to have an attorney represent you. So I think that's all we have for this CP notice. I'll put links in the show notes to the articles and videos that we've created about all of these forms mentioned in the video. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. And if you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, if there's a topic that you'd like to see covered in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.